In October, Sarah and I journeyed over the Tioga Pass through Yosemite to hang out for a few days in Mono County to enjoy the fall colors. We've been there before, but this trip wowed us with spectacular colors and scenery. I mean, how many times do you see water this clear and pristine? The mountains still had snow, evidence of how much fell in the first part of 2023. There's a distinct reason why I love coming down 395. Backside of California's Sierra Nevada is such a beautiful place. This is the road up to Convict Lake. I do have to say that 395, Highway 395, and the backside of the Sierra Nevada is absolutely gorgeous in October, with all the fall colors that are starting to pop. It's an incredible place. This beautiful lake was once called Monte Diablo, but is now called Convict Lake because of what happened here over 150 years ago. There's a story about some convicts who escaped to this lake, and then they were apprehended, and I believe some people were murdered. And one of the guys who was murdered is buried over in Benton Springs, California. It's about a short distance on the east side of us. On September 17, 1871, 29 prisoners escaped from the Nevada State Prison in Carson City after killing a guard and wounding several others. Among the escapees were 3 men who staged the Great Train Robbery in Verde, Nevada. They were Tilton Cockrell, John Squires, and John Chapman. The escapees split up, with convicted murderer Charlie Jones leading one group into this region, stealing horses and provisions along the way for food and supplies. As they camped out near Convict Creek, a man named Billy Poor, delivering mail on horseback, stumbled upon the fugitives. Jones and fellow inmate Leandor Morton killed Billy Poor so that he wouldn't be able to slip away and report their whereabouts. They took his horse and dressed in his clothes. When news of Poor's murder reached this community in Mono County, residents were outraged and formed a citizens' posse to hunt down the convicts. By September 22, 1871, Sheriff George Hightower and Indian Deputy Mono Jim led a new posse of 10 men to 4 convicts camping near the creek. A shootout occurred which resulted in the deaths of posse members Mono Jim and Robert Morrison, a businessman and Wells Fargo agent from Benton Springs. The remaining convicts escaped, only to be captured later in Round Valley. Morrison is one of the noteworthy burials in the Benton Hot Springs Cemetery. Mount Morrison behind the lake was named after the slain posse member, with its nearby smaller peak named after Mono Jim. By November 1st, 18 of the 29 prisoners had been captured, some lynched on the way back to prison. Jones was eventually captured and executed. So this tree fell, and look at all these rocks that have been picked up and lifted off the ground. While Sarah and I love to visit the city of Mammoth Lakes, we hadn't journeyed beyond Mammoth Mountain to this amazing vista of the jaw-dropping Minettes, which are on the backside of world-famous Yosemite. Famed naturalist John Muir explored this backcountry of Yosemite and the Minettes, a jagged sawtooth ridge of mountains named so because they resemble the spires of a Muslim temple. Muir was the first recorded person to climb Mount Ritter of the Ritter Range. The most prominent spire of the Minettes is named after legendary climber Norman Clyde, best known for his daring actions of August 1933. A good friend of Clyde's was Walter A. Starr Jr., nicknamed Peter Starr, a 30-year-old lawyer from the Bay Area who loved climbing these jagged peaks. Starr was overdue from a hike to the Ritter Range, so a search party of climbers, including Clyde, went looking for him. The search turned up nothing and was called off on August 19, 1933. But Norman Clyde wouldn't give up. After several days of climbing, Clyde found the remains of Starr, outstretched on a slope ledge on the northwest side of the Michael Minaret. Clyde returned to a phone and broke the news to Starr's family, but returned with fellow climber Jules Eichert days later to give Starr a burial fitting for a climber. They collected his remains, placed them in a bag, and covered it with rocks. At 12,000 feet high, the grave is the highest known in the Sierra and possibly in the lower 48 states. The grave is marked here in this photo. In 1973, a climber placed a wooden memorial marker at the grave, and in 2003, on the 60th anniversary of Starr's death, climber David Daly carried a memorial plaque to affix to a rock near the location of the remains of Starr. It does seem odd to me that the most prominent of the ancient peaks, the Clyde Minaret identified here, is named after a man who was alive in my lifetime. Norm Clyde was a prolific climber who scaled Mount Whitney at least 50 times. Between 1914 to about 1940, he became the first climber to reach the tops of at least 126 peaks. He first climbed the spire that would be named after him in June 1928. He died in 1972 at the ripe old age of 87, and his remains are on the Clyde Spires on the northeast boundary of Kings Canyon National Park, which he was the first to climb in 1933. Just sitting here on the rocks enjoying this view in front of us.
Where the chipmunk went.
Chipmunk. She's totally into chipmunks.
Ain't just chipmunks, though. I mean, if a bear showed up, that'd be cool, too.
Donkeys.
Donkeys?
Donkeys.
There ain't no donkeys around here.
The rugged and craggy mountains west of Mammoth Lakes helped to guard the crash site of a famous aviator for 13 months, from 2007 to 2008. Steve Fossett held numerous world records and was the first person to circumnavigate the world solo in a hot air balloon. He also was the first to fly a plane solo around the globe without refueling. Fossett took off in his small plane from a private airstrip near Smith Valley, Nevada. When he didn't return, search parties were launched which lasted for weeks. It was as if his plane had just vanished. So 63-year-old Fossett was declared dead by his wife. The location of the plane remained a mystery for 13 months, until a hiker named Preston Morrow stumbled upon Fossett's pilot's ID, FAA cards, a tattered sweatshirt, and $1,000 cash, which led to the discovery of the wreckage. The debris field was 150 by 400 feet long, and the engine was 300 feet from the fuselage, indicating a horrendous impact. As a side note, in 2005 I had written twice to Fossett to obtain his signature on 2 photos. In 1972, then Governor Ronald Reagan rode on horseback to Summit Meadow to announce President Nixon's decision to cease any federal plans for a Trans-Sierra Highway through Reds Meadow Valley. So, Mammoth Mountain's back there. It's about 11,000 feet up. And on this trip, we're not able to go up there because the gondolas aren't running mid-October. But we've been up there, and the view of the Minarets, once you're up there, it's just amazing. But where we're at right now is just really gorgeous as well. On the way to the earthquake fault, we rounded the corner to see a coyote standing in the road that had the attention of a family. So we stopped, and he came around on Sarah's side.
Hi, dog. You're a coyote, right?
So now we're going to go check out the earthquake fault here that's in Mammoth, and there's a little trail about 2/10 of a mile. We're going to check it out. Technically, it's not a fault, but a fissure that's up to 10 feet wide and 60 feet deep. The earthquake fault cuts through volcanic rock, part of the glassy rhyolite lava flow from Mammoth Mountain, and formed by tectonic stresses in the Earth's crust. The fault line lines up with the Anyomono craters and is believed to be part of the east-west stretching that is gradually widening the entire basin and range region. The age of the fissure is unknown, but some of the trees growing in the fissure are around 160 years old, indicating that the crack is at least that old. The sides are jagged and uneroded and lack pumice fill, suggesting that it's still very young in geological time. We were trying to figure out the name of this fault. I think it's the Inyo fault, but I said it could be no one's fault or my fault, or we're trying to be funny. Someday the magma might rise to the surface, but it's also possible that the fissure could slowly fill in with debris. Winter storms would sometimes last year-round in the bottom of the fissure, which allowed Native Americans a place to store their food at colder temperatures into the summer.
Near the road on the way to Old Mammoth City lies the lonely grave of a woman who braved the harsh Sierra winters in the old mining camp with her husband in 1881.
History Hunters episode wouldn't be the same without a grave visit, and we found a grave of a brave pioneer woman who died here.
What was her story? There are two versions, actually. The first claimed the woman was accidentally shot and killed by her husband. The other, more likely version has Julia E Townsend, a New York native, coming to the goldfields of the West with her parents sometime before she was 20. In the mid-1860s, she lived in Virginia City, Nevada, and by 1868 met and married Bryant Townsend, a bookkeeper from St. Louis. They lived in Virginia City where they raised children named Minnie, Bryant, and Persia. By April 1880, Bryant was out of work when the silver ore began to play out. They left for new stakes in Mammoth City for work. In November 1881, most of Mammoth City was failing, and more than likely the Townsends were down on their luck as well. We don't know what took her life, but disease is probably the reason. As legend tells, Julia died in November and was buried in March when the ground was thawed, yet her grave marker lists her date of death as March 14, 1882. Since the ground was covered with deep snow when she died, her handmade coffin was packed in snow until she could be buried the next March. An old picket fence around her grave has been replaced by a more sturdy one. The story goes that this young mother of three dreamed someday of having a house with a picket fence. Her grieving husband then gave her the only picket fence that he could, around her grave.
We can't quite figure out why they've got the numbers messed up. Either way you look at it, 64, the 4's backwards, or 46, the 6 is backwards. So we're walking in.
I wish I would have worn my other shoes. I wasn't expecting that we were going to go straight into...
Devil's Postpile National Monument was named for a dark column of rocks that appear as a pile of posts pushed up from the depths of the earth by the devil himself. But it's actually an ancient lava flow formation. The geological formation was once part of Yosemite National Park, but discovery of gold in 1905 near Mammoth Lakes prompted a boundary change that left the Postpile on adjacent public land. The formation is in a basin that was once considered for a hydroelectric dam, which would have called for the columns to be blasted. John Muir and other influential Californians persuaded the federal government to halt those plans, and in 1911, President William Howard Taft protected the area as a national monument.
What'd you think of the devil?
Of the devil?
The devil's work.
The devil's work? That's what that is the devil's work?
I hope not.
Pretty impressive.
I said it's his post piles. I think it's God's post piles.
After leaving Devil's Postpile, we stopped at this, Starkweather Lake, to walk around. It was then that I noticed this gnarly tree, which appeared as though maybe its growth had been stunted by a lightning strike. We also noticed a great deal of pumice stone scattered around the lake shore, just like the blocks that you buy to clean your toilet bowl. We stopped by the Minaret Scenic Lookout one last time, where I observed one of the most surreal cloud formations I believe I've ever seen. We are coming to the end of this episode on the Mammoth Lakes area. On your way out, if you could please let us know what stood out to you about what you saw or learned here, we would appreciate it. And if you don't mind, please click on the like button. One last thing that you could do to help History Hunters is to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you'll know the minute that we post a new video. We will be grateful if you do so. Thank you so much for watching this episode of History Hunters.